What is up, fight fans? It's your boy Jordan Kurtz. Comments from the Peanut Gallery. Give me that follow along online on Instagram or on Threads. Follow me along online at the Peanut Gallery MMA on TikTok. This is the MMA plug presented to you by Mile High Sports. We are coming to you live from the studio at number 38, presented to you by Volo and the Vimos app. Guys, just want to give a quick shout out real quick before we get too far into the thick of things to the whole Mile High Sports crew. They are the go-to guys for all things in the core four of sports. Hit that like, share, and subscribe button wherever it is possible. Now, in the NFL right now, we are fresh into the offseason, but it's just a short time away from all those discussions around free agency, pro days, combines, roster moves, and draft talk. As far as hockey goes, the NHL is on its little bit of hiatus and a pause right now, but literally as we speak right now, the U.S. is in, I believe it's the quarterfinals round right now. Who's that again? They're going up against Sweden.
Yep.
Yeah, so tough matchup there in the quarterfinals right now, but you have Olympic hockey in full swing right now. You have the Nuggets looking to get back to full steam ahead in this second half as they get some of their big guns coming back from injury. You had all the all-star proceedings over the weekend, and I just want to further the I hate LeBron parade. And yeah, he ruined the All-Star game, he ruined the dunk contest, he ruined all of those things. He ruined the All-Star game when Kobe basically, I don't know if I could say the terminology here, but Kobe basically chumped him and said, hey, like you're gonna
say the word with a B?
Yeah,
exactly. You can say it.
He bitched him up. He straight up bitched him up in the All-Star game so bad. And then when it came to the dunk contest, him never even jumping in it, all the greats of the greats through the years have done it. And you could say that, oh, well, all the creativity is gone. There's not much more that you can do. Yeah, but some of those great dunks that you're saying maxed off the creativity happened after it would have been his early years in the league to go on and participate. So again, just when we're talking about the greats of the greats, they all did those things. Jordan in an all-star game said, nah, I'm going to take it to you because this is what is perceived to be a competitive realm. Kobe did exactly that to him. He said, hey, you think that you're the man? No, I'm going to show you that I am still that guy. You can go look that up. Kobe bitches up LeBron. There's straight up full-on highlights and cut-ups of it. There's talks of the old guys like Kevin Garnett talking about it. Yeah, that's just, me ranting a little bit, but I can't help but just drive the dagger a little bit on that guy. Just can't stand him. In baseball, you have spring training getting in motion. Now, I want to ask you guys all this. What is your over-under on 100.5 losses for the Rockies this season? They've done some moves in the front office, but how much does any of that translate into actual wins on the field? Especially in the division that they're in, pretty negligible probably. But make sure that you check out the Mile High Sports Network wherever it is possible. Check out the magazine, the podcast side of things, YouTube, the website. Come down here to the number 38. Check out some of the games on TV. Get a bite at the kitchen, a drink at the bar. Pick up a Mile High Sports T-shirt. Support everything all in the ecosystem here. Moving along to the Colorado rundown. There's a couple of weeks off here, but then getting into the month of March, you're going to have Battle MMA Championships back in motion for 2026. They have a show going down at the Colorado Springs City Hub on March 7th. You have a couple of shows going down on March 21st. That is going to be 5280 Muay Thai going down in the afternoon. That Muay Thai matinee over at the Stampede, followed by the SoCo Showdown in Pueblo at the Pueblo Ice Arena for Sparta. The next weekend at the Stampede, you're going to have Colorado Combat Club back for Colorado Combat Club 29. And then in April, you're going to have Sparta back up in Northern Colorado going down April 25th at the Blue Arena. Lots of fighters from the local scene, local ecosystem, if you will, that are going to be across all of those cards. Please go out and support them. If you don't have the chance to check them out in person, check out the stream. If you have the opportunity to buy the tickets directly from the fighters themselves, please do that. It's going to save you a few bucks on ticket fees online, and it just makes the process so much easier. All of that to be said, we're going to swing into the weekend recap. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about as far as fight breakdowns, just being that the UFC was off. There wasn't any sort of major action there, but I will give a shout out to Vanilla Thunder Ben Tynan over in One Championship. Got a big win over in Lumpini Boxing Stadium for one with the arm triangle. Ben Tynan, a heavyweight that trains out of the Denver area, so want to give him a shout out. Couple of big headlines, though, to discuss because, again, not a whole lot to recap as far as actual fights, but there were some pretty big headlines that happened over the last few days. Guys, Cain is home. Former UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez, after 10 long months of incarceration in the state of California, is finally home. Now, while I do believe that 10 months was too long, I do also understand, if we take a step back from it, being completely objective from the justice end of things. Well, yeah, I mean, I do get that there has to be some sort of parameters out there that says that you can't just go, ramming your truck into someone and shooting at them in public. Like, I do get that from an actual, practical or whatever the right descriptor that the academics and Gentiles out there would have. But I also come from the world of, if I found out that you were accused of raping my child, I am going to stop at no lengths to make sure that you feel the 7th layer of hell. And yeah, you might come unglued a little bit in the process. I could 100% still, circling back to the original discussion that we had on this point, understand how Cain came unglued and just attacked the man in the way that he did, instead of getting all the way up on him one-on-one, where we know how that would have ended. That would have been massacre. That would have been a bloody massacre by bare hands. And I still think that would have been, as this Galarte trial is ongoing, I still think that should be the verdict, is that just put him in a room for a few minutes alone with Cain and let Cain go to work. Hey, I'm all for it. I did also see that there was a dealership out there in California that gifted Cain a new truck. I think that's awesome. Obviously, part of the storyline, or part of all of the events that happened, which there's a video out there that has the actual incident of Cain running him down. There's a video of it. Well, yeah, the truck was battered up in the process, using it as a battering ram and going off road at certain points and chasing Galarte down. Well, they gifted him a truck. So nice little homecoming present there, along with getting let out of the correctional van to the hugs of his family, the tune of a mariachi band right there on hand. Just gotta love seeing that Cain is finally back. And, I can imagine a world where Cain just kind of stays away and just sticks to his family, doesn't do a whole lot out there besides, maybe a few appearances here and there. But I could also see a world where this is a massive springboard for Cain on the advocacy side. There are rumors that he's going to be walking out with Anthony Fluffy Hernandez this weekend down in Houston. Don't know if that's true. I just saw the rumors, and you know how some of those clickbait headlines can sometimes be, especially with all of the stuff surrounding Cain right now, and given that it's Fluffy's main event fight week. Don't know the exact accuracy of that claim. That would be awesome to see Cain making the walk with him, just all things considered. Moving along from that story, though, I told you. I have receipts from August 28th, that I told you that Ronda Rousey was coming back. It's more than 6 months. That was last summer that I have receipts of telling you that Ronda was coming back. A lot of you balked at the statement. You said, oh, no, it's not happening. Oh, she's went on this media tour for years talking about how she's done fighting, about how the concussions were too much, about how she believes that she's a walking CTE case. Yeah, a lot of those things might have been true, but that still didn't mean that I had 100% concrete intel that she was coming back. And you wanted to laugh. You wanted to say that it wasn't happening. You wanted to doubt me. I told you that it was happening. More and more evidence continued to support that early claim that I had that she was coming back. She's going on podcasts left and right, and she's beat up and bruised from training. You're not just getting beat up and bruised by going to cardio kickboxing or hitting pads. You're not getting a black eye from that. You're getting that from sparring. You're doing that with intentional training. There's no reason why she, at this point of her life, of her career, would be going through full-on sparring rounds with the names that she was going through those rounds with if there was not some sort of intent behind it. I told you in December of last year that Gina Carano was coming back. That it wasn't just that she was back in the gym, that yes, she was going to make a foray back into fighting. I forecasted, I believe it was, I want to say December 12th, that the Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey matchup was going to happen. Still, a lot of you said there's no way that it happens. There's no chance that it's going to go down. The only thing that I did not get right was that it's not for the UFC. But there is 100% a fight that is going down between Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano. Arguably the two biggest figures in the early history of women's MMA. You could absolutely make the argument that they're both Mount Rushmore for what they did at the time. Gina being the first big star, Ronda coming along and slingshotting it into becoming basically the foundation for what it is today. And then, yeah, throw in Cyborg for all of her accomplishments. Maybe throw in a Amanda Nunes, and maybe Kayla comes if that list of accomplishments continues. But again, I told you that this was happening, and you doubted me. There are some things that your boy, Kobe, just can't miss. When I have that type of intel, do not ever doubt me. I promise you that. I wouldn't put my name behind something that crazy and out there if there wasn't something behind it. Moving along into this weekend's weekend preview, we have UFC Fight Night going down in Houston. There's a couple of fights going down in Houston. You also have Fury happening down there in the state of Texas. Want to give a shout out to Carlos Calderon, who's going to be on that card. But as far as UFC Fight Night going down in Houston, this is a headline matchup between two middleweights, a couple of top contenders, former UFC undisputed champion in Sean Strickland, taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. These are two styles that are really difficult to look good against in their own, and they're very different styles. That's why it's such a great styles clash as far as the actual math on the field with this matchup. Fluffy, in a lot of ways, is like a middleweight Kane. He is relentless with his pace and his pressure. His takedowns come at a ridiculously high volume. He has 54 takedowns. That's the most in UFC middleweight history. He can strike serviceably and handle himself with just about anybody in the division. And the gas tank is next level for middleweight. Sean Strickland, on the flip side, he works beautifully behind his jab. You know, there's certainly some performances where you could point to where, oh, it's just jab teep, jab teep, jab teep. Totally understand. But when Sean's at his best, it's hard to beat that. It's hard to work around that. You might say that, oh, yeah, it's more of a point style striking versus going and fighting to the death, the way that Sean Strickland likes to scream and say. But you do have those moments of brilliance from Sean where he'll leave it all out there, like the Israel Adesanya fight or some of the fights along the climb on the way up where he just goes for it. Well, I think that Fluffy is going to bring a pace to him where he's going to have to put the foot on the gas and go for it. As far as the training footage that's been put out, well, he's been putting a foot on the gas and been really trying to up his volume, up his pace. Well, I think that's definitely in preparation for the fight that Fluffy's going to bring. Sean Strickland, as far as a defensive perspective goes, he's one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Yeah, people always point to the iCarly memes and the Alex Pineda knockout and all, and that's fair. Have it. That's the age of the internet. But statistically, especially when we're taking a look at the sample of the high-level top contender fights or title fights that he's been in, he defends more than 61% of all strikes that are thrown at him. That's the highest rate among active fighters in the weight class. He's also landed the most significant strikes in divisional history. So again, when he's fighting at his range, using his tempo, Sean is hard to look good against. But I believe that Fluffy has the ability to work his way inside, to crowd Sean, to put the pressure on him. Sean is a way better grappler than he gets credit for. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's a solid wrestler, but he just never uses it. Because in most cases, he doesn't really have to, or he doesn't have somebody who forces him to need to use it. Well, this is a matchup where we're going to see some of that come out. In the co-main event matchup, you have a welterweight showdown between Jeff Neal and Uris the Dentist Medic. Uris Medic, he's a guy who he's certainly got a lot more perspective, I guess, options, if you will, in the future, as opposed to where Jeff Neal is. I think Jeff Neal has kind of, at this stage of the game, he's became a gatekeeper at 170. He's one of those guys that, you know, if you can get past him, then, well, you know what? We know that you've got a little bit of something to you. Now, some of that could also be, or some of those performances that didn't go Jeff Neal's way could be explained by the big story that came out, or the big statement that he just put out over the last few days of, he went through years, the last few years, he was battling some pretty heavy addiction. You know, he said he went from, and he said it's all kind of started during COVID. Once everything got locked down, there wasn't as much to do, and his vices started to get the worst of him. Started off by drinking maybe a couple of nights a week, doing some lines here or there, to, well, you know how that story goes, becoming a full-blown addict. Well, that obviously is going to impact your performance inside of the cage. It made impacts to his general health. I mean, if we remember a few years back, he was hospitalized with sepsis, which he attributed to complications due to his party lifestyle and habits. I don't know that we'll ever see the true potential of what could have been for Jeff Neal. I don't know that we'll ever see that at this stage. I think that we could still see a really quality veteran fighter who has strong boxing, a crisp, compact stance. But then again, we don't know what the damage accumulation factor from just the actual time spent in the cage to the coke on his brain has done. Those are both terrible things when it comes to longevity within this sport. Medic, on the other side of things, he has an average fight time at 4 minutes and 26 seconds. That's the shortest average fight time for qualified guys with that amount of time in the division. He's earned all 12 of his victories by stoppage. All 6 UFC wins are by knockout. His 6 knockouts since 2021 in the UFC are tied for the 3rd most in the UFC behind Alex Pereira, who has 8, and Steve Mean Machine Garcia, who has 7. We know what Mick Maynard was potentially looking for when he set this matchup up. He wants to see if this young kid really has that sauce that can propel him into some of that next tier at 170. It's the nature of the beast for what it is. You have a featherweight matchup going down between Dan Ige and Melky Costa. Now, this is a guaranteed win for the fans. You have Dan Ige as one of only 2 guys. Only him and Korean Zombie have 2 under 1 minute knockouts in the featherweight division. You have Melky Costa on the flip side, who he's on a tremendous streak right now. And you have Dan Ige, who's looking to still say that I'm a very qualified veteran and I'm standing my ground. He's defending his post against the rising contender. Costa's on, I believe it's a 6-fight streak right now. And again, these guys just are going to give the fans a thrilling fight with 2 exciting styles. Dan Ige, very boxing heavy. Melky Costa, a kickboxing Muay Thai heavy style guy, but also has some slick grappling within his arsenal. It's a fun fight for everybody involved. Michel Pereira, who's going to be taking on Zach Reese. Now, this is the first time in his entire career that Michel Pereira Demoledor is on that 3-fight losing streak. He's a guy who right away, as soon as he went to middleweight, we thought, man, this might be a contender. Shot out to 3-0 right away. And then now has since gone 3-3. When he's on, he is such a dangerous opponent. I mean, a dude who is that big, that fast, that explosive, that dynamic and creative. He's a scary opponent. But he's also got a lot of flaws. He's also got openings and routes to victory. And I don't know if it's more so that at these highest of levels, coaches are able to break that down and they're able to expose him, or I don't know if it's something that's gone on with him tactically. I mean, he's always had issues with the gas tank. I don't necessarily know that that's the full explanatory factor for the 3-fight skid. I know that his willingness to go risk it and throw everything but the kitchen sink at times, well, that's obviously a factor that works against him. That's going to leave you more tired. That's going to leave you susceptible to counters. That's going to put you in the crosshairs to being tagged up. I don't know if Zach Reese is the guy to do it, though. Zach Reese has been fairly active, or very active, I should say, since he's been in the UFC. He's had some wins and he's had some losses. But I could also see in a certain way that, this is a guy that if Michel Pereira really is a contender, or if there is still juice left to be squeezed from that berry, he should be able to beat Zach Reese. If not, hey, that's a 4-fight skid, and you evaluate what the options are for him at that point, especially depending on how he looks in his performance. You've got a couple other fights that, I mean, you have a matchup between Jacoby Smith and Josiah Harrell. 2 guys at 11-0. 2 maybe a little bit different points of their career, if you will. Jacoby Smith, he's been on a tear ever since he came out of the D1 wrestling ranks. He was a stud there in the NCAA, comes into MMA, is lit up the scene again to a tune of 11-0. Josiah Harrell was signed to the UFC a couple of years ago and was actually scheduled in his debut to face Jack Della Maddalena. Well, pre-fight medicals. They found some abnormalities. They found some things that were a little concerning in those reports, as it's been explained. And he was released before he could actually fight. Well, a couple years go by, a couple of fights on a couple of different shows, is able to then re-administer all of the medical processes, passes this time, gets re-signed. He's sitting at 11-0 as well, as mentioned. So that being said, two guys who have a great deal of skill, some impressive resumes up to this point, both at 11-0. Somebody's O has got to go. You have a heavyweight matchup between Sergey the Polar Bear Spivak and Ante Dalia. Now, Sergey Spivak, I believe he's like third in the heavyweight division all time with takedowns, or maybe it's third of the current roster. Can't remember one of those two, but more or less, I guess that kind of explains what you would expect to see from him in the fight. Dalia, a little bit more of a boxer. Either way, probably not going to be the most exciting of the fights on the card. Heavyweight division right now, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the program, but it's in such a dismal state. And especially after we saw that Kuniev and Almeida fight, man, yeah, there's a lot to be desired at 265-pound limit. You have a fight between Chidi Njokuani and Carlos Leal. If you were to entertain any sort of money-seeking opportunities from this fight, I think it's a hammer and a lock on Chidi. He's had quite a great deal of success since moving to 170, and I just think that Leal, I just don't think he's good. I guess that's the best way to put it. I'm not sold on him. I don't think that he really has much that he brings to the table aside from being a tough game veteran. Somebody with the dimensions that Chidi has, who has done well so far at 170. That Muay Thai is going to be vicious. I could see either a knee or an elbow leading to the knockout in that fight. Next matchup from that, you've got Ode Osborne. He's taking on Aldueris. Ode is one of those guys at 125 pounds who he's one of the aliens of the division, right? He's like 6 foot tall, fighting at 125 pounds. Very few guys ever present those sort of dimensions. There's nights where he goes in there and he looks extremely gifted, talented. He's strong. He's fast. He's got pop in his hands at times. And then there's other nights where it's just a kind of performance. He's certainly got a lot of love from the UFC. He's been around for a long time. They've weathered some ups and some downs with him, but he's got a really tough opponent on his hands. A guy who's coming into the fight at just 10-1. Ode's kind of became not necessarily a Jeff Neal, but he's up that vein of a gatekeeper at 125 of your Jeff Neals, Magnes, those sorts of guys. You're now, I guess you could consider Fiziev kind of in that position at 55, just kind of in one of those gatekeeper type positions, the way that Cannonier served at 85 for a long time, or Brunson, if you will. It's kind of in that role. Another fight on the card, you got a Denver boy. You have Luis Grim-Grillet making his return to the octagon, taking on Alvin Correa. Both guys fought in the LFA. Luis, also a veteran of Fury FC, veteran of Colorado Combat Club, Dana White Contender Series. It's not been the easiest road for Luis so far in the UFC, and I think that just has to go to show you how hard it is to actually win in the dance against some of the best competition in the world in the UFC. Luis was 10-0 before he got to the UFC. He's unfortunately been on the wrong side of a couple of fights, now sitting at 10-2. One of those being a loss that he took to Ode Osborne in his debut, and then lost a close decision at Noche over the last year down in Texas. Well, makes a return back to Texas once again in Houston. And I think that you're going to see a very inspired performance from Luis. I think that Luis knows that his back is up against the wall, just calling it for what it is. I mean, he's a friend of the program. I love the man to death. We spent a lot of time together throughout the years, but objectively speaking, especially in a smaller weight class, going 3 down right away, it's tough. It's a tough thing to overcome. But he goes out there and has a very impressive victory, has a chance to go get a 25K at minimum bonus, if not still to show for a performance bonus at 100K. Let's go. It's a matchup that it's obviously no matchup is going to be easy, but I think that it's a matchup that is very winnable. And especially if Luis goes out there and fights free and is that violent little anger, murderous gremlin, I think that this could be a matchup where he does have the chance to go out there and secure a finish. Call me a homer, but I'm riding for the hometown kid. Got a matchup in the women's bantamweight division between Nora Cornell and Jocelyn Edwards. I think every time Jocelyn Edwards fights, the UFC comment feeds get flooded with the yam emoji. You have a matchup between Ramiz Brahimaj and Puna Soriano going down in the welterweight division. I think that this has the chance to potentially be a fight of the night. You have Puna, who I believe he's undefeated since going to 170. You have Ramiz Brahimaj, who he's overcome some incredible health adversity throughout his life and his career. He's had some great success and some battles in the octagon throughout the years. I think that's a fight that you could very well see a potential of two guys who they're not the most polished, but they are going to go scrap, and it's a styles clash. Ramiz, I believe, is the vastly superior grappler, whereas Puna's an island banger. I mean, he's a Hawaiian through and through. He wants to go out there and he wants to punch your head into orbit. Him and Dan Ige have been homies since they've been kids. It's another opportunity where they get to share a fight card, and I just think that that adds a little bit of a cool element from the human interest side, that these two guys who they've been friends since they were island boys over, in the early stages of life, grown up together all the way and rose the ranks and are now both on the world's highest stage fighting together in a sold out arena down in Houston. Pretty cool from the human interest side of things. Next matchup, you have Jean-Paul Labosniani taking on Filthy Phil Rowe, the Fresh Prince Phil Rowe. I don't know how to call this one, guys. I struggle with this because on one hand, when we're talking about who Phil Rowe is, when he's been at his best, we've seen a Phil Rowe who is competitive with, I'm not going to say he's a top 10 guy, but he's a fringe contender. He's a fringe ranked guy. Maybe if you were to bounce him somewhere in between from time to time, depending on what the run is, sitting 12 to 15. I'm not mad at that. I'm not going to scoff at that. But he's another longtime veteran who's had a lot of fights against very reputable names and has had his ups and downs. Jean-Paul Labosniani, on the other hand, he is new into his UFC run, made his way there by way of becoming an LFA champion and then becoming a contract winner off of the Contender Series. He actually, fun fact, that wasn't the first time that he fought for an LFA world title. He first fought for an LFA world title in May of, I want to say it was 2023. Yeah, May of 2023. I want to say he fought Jacoby Jones, fought our boy, Big Toe, when Big Toe won the world title. But obviously, that fight didn't go John Paul's way. John Paul rebounds from the loss, goes on and moves up a weight class, goes to welterweight, becomes an LFA world champion, gets the Contender Series, has a viral knockout, gets into the UFC, and here we are. John Paul Labosniani has incredible lineage and roots as far as his training and his martial arts journey goes. I mean, his family being rooted to the original Gracie system out in California way back in the day, to his training that he's spent overseas. Again, that story I've heard told time over in the buildup of that LFA title fight matchup back in the day. But, this is a kid who he's spent his entire life in the gym. And when he's on, I believe his nickname is still Mufasa. He's a tough out. He's a kid who brings a dynamic skill set, but I don't know how that stacks up against somebody who has the veteran experience and presence the way that Phil Rowe does. That's what we're going to see in a couple of these matchups here on this card, where you have somebody who is much earlier on in their career taking on that guy who has a lot of time in the saddle. I think that that's a very common theme with a lot of these matchups on the card. It's just the same as the next one, which is Yadier Del Valle, who is still only a couple of fights into his UFC run, who has taken on Jordan Levitt. Jordan Levitt, a veteran of the UFC for years now, another guy who was on Contender, has fought lots of your very reputable names. You have Jordan Levitt, he's moved down to featherweight. He spent a lot of time at lightweight, fought guys like Patty and so on and so forth. Had the viral knockout with the slam. He's very quirky. And that draws the ire of some of the fan base out there. But the dude can fight. Plain and simple. He's got a tough test against him, though, and a pretty big for the featherweight division, Cuban black belt and Yadier Del Valle. His last fight obviously had some controversy to it. No need to get into the details of that, but I'm sure that you're going to see a very inspired performance from Yadier, just so that he can go out there and kind of tell people that, yeah, that last one wasn't because of what they're saying what happened. It's because I am him. I would imagine that he goes out there with that type of effort. And then opening up the card, you have Carly Judas taking on Juliana Killer Miller. Juju was the Ultimate Fighter champion a couple of seasons back. She's had some ups and downs as far as her UFC run goes. I don't know if we're ever going to see her as a top-ranked flyweight, if we're ever going to see her actualize UFC gold, but she does have some skill. I mean, she's tough. She's got some ability. She's probably best in the jiu-jitsu realm, but, she's going to go out there and mix it up to a certain extent. I thought that she was probably one of the more green prospects on the season of tough that she was on, but she just kept on finding ways to win. And there's sometimes something to be said about someone who, hey, they may not be that polished. They may not be what we perceive from an X's and O's or a tactical perspective as quote unquote good. But if they find ways to win, it's effective, right? On the flip side, you have her opponent, and Carly has won all 5 of her professional bouts by KO or TKO. She's the first woman in UFC history to earn knockout victories that came from either a knee or a kick. She's already tied for the most bonuses in the division. Yeah, this might be a tough night for Tough 30 champion, or I'm pretty sure it was Tough 30, but yeah, this might be a tough night for Ultimate Fighter champion Juliana Killer Miller. But if she could use her grappling, I just don't know if she has good enough offensive wrestling. That's the biggest issue. We've talked about it time and time again. There's a lot of people who are really good at jiu-jitsu and really good submission artists, especially once they're down on the canvas. But if you don't have a way to get somebody there, if you don't have the offensive wrestling, if you don't have the clinch, if you don't have the judo, if you don't have the trip series or any way to get them down onto the mat, you're in trouble. There is a gap. You could be a solid striker. You could be really good at jiu-jitsu. But if you don't have wrestling to get you down there when you're getting your ass whooped in the striking department, it's going to be a problem. You are going to take a lot of damage, and that's been kind of the tale of Juliana's career. I don't know if she'll be able to withstand the explosively violent, powerful storm that Carly Judas brings to the cage. But just like that, folks, that wraps up our UFC Fight Night preview for down in Texas. We're going to hit a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Raising Cane's invites you to grab life by the chicken fingers. So get out there. Be you. Do you. Embrace whatever makes you, you. All while enjoying Raising Cane's hand-battered cooked-to-order chicken fingers, crispy crinkle-cut fries, buttery Texas toast, and that secret recipe cane sauce that makes everything that much better. So go on, savor the day.
Raising Cane's chicken fingers. One love.
Whoever said work smarter, not harder, didn't realize you could do both.
Welcome back to the MMA Plug, presented to you by Mile High Sports. We are coming to you live from the studio at number 38, presented to you by Volo and the Vimos app. Guys, I want to talk to you real quick about my thoughts on how can we save the heavyweight division? Because it's not, if it's not on life support, it's as close as it's ever been. Especially when you see a number 8 ranked heavyweight, in the world get cut like Jailton Almeida. Yeah, I think that they just saw that, we know what his ceiling is and he's potentially regressing. We don't want anything more to do with it. Well, I've got 4 different steps or 4 different measures, if you will, that I believe could go on to save the heavyweight division. Number 1, I think you let Alex Pereira move up and challenge for the heavyweight title. Especially with the uncertainty surrounding Tom right now and when his return might be, all of the surgeries, so on and so forth with his eyes, what is the condition when he's actually going to be back? Reportedly undergoing vertigo symptoms as well. When will Tom actually be back? We don't know that. Well, if you're not going to make him vacate, as there's been some reports that have said that they've asked him to vacate, if you're not going to do that, that's fine. I totally get it. It wasn't his fault that he was fouled, that he was injured. So I can understand not asking him to vacate, but this is one of those instances where you should use an interim title. Well, even if it's just interim, then that sets up the opportunity for the undisputed unification title bout down the way. Given that we already spoke on the potential card and who knows who else is going to be added to that MVP card for Netflix for the Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey card. Well, if you're the UFC, you've got to potentially be thinking, hey, let's lock this in. John Jones, Alex Pereira, White House, interim heavyweight title on the line. Let's do this. If that's not one of your first moves, I don't know what's going on. Gable Stevenson fights tomorrow. I think it's a foregone conclusion, and obviously you still got to go out there and fight the fight. Anything can happen, especially at heavyweight, blah, blah, blah. Gable goes out there and gets another win tomorrow night. You sign him immediately. You're not letting it go all the way through next contender season or anything like that. You are signing him immediately, and Gable can compete with anybody in the top of the heavyweight ranks today. He could be a title contender right now, today. You get past whatever the money issue is with Rico Verhoeven. That's reportedly what the holdoff was from him ultimately being signed. I know that there were some outlets that jumped the gun in saying that he was already on the roster, that he was signed. And I think that misled a lot of people. I mean, I got duped on a couple of headlines myself thinking that he was on the roster. Didn't happen. They couldn't come to terms financially. Whatever that number is, you just 10x'd your annual operating budget on TV rights alone, not to mention what you got from naming rights for the Apex, all these other sponsorship deals that have been brought into the partnerships of the UFC over the last couple of years. You just went from 100 million to 1.1 billion per year for your broadcast rights. That surge in money is what you use to go get guys like Rico Verhoeven. Which segues into the next point. You have recently heard the reports of guys like Jaylen Brown of the NBA and Max Crosby of the NFL who have spoken to Dana White about prospective fights once they are done with their playing careers in their existing sports. Well, when you're asking why the heavyweight division is so bad, it's rooted in questions like this. The best athletes at heavyweight do something else that's for a way fatter check. And in some ways, I mean, I'm not trying to say that the skill isn't as hard, but physically, in a lot of situations, might be less demanding in terms of the actual day-to-day punishment that you go through to be a top MMA fighter. First off, a big part of this is going to circle back again to the point of fighter pay. They both make more money in one game check than what almost a full fight card makes. Jaylen Brown in the NBA makes $60 million a year, which is roughly about $500K a game. Max Crosby in the NFL makes $35 million a year, which comes down to approximately $2 million a game. When you put that in perspective, that fighters just barely got bonuses bumped to $100K, and there's only a handful of fighters that are making anywhere near the ballpark of $500K or more per fight. That should tell you a little bit of where the math on the field is. Oh yeah, mind you, also, for those few fighters on the roster who are making anywhere near $500K per fight or more, or just somewhere within that general standard deviation, that's a check that's only coming roughly on average 2 to 3 times a year with no guarantees. Jaylen Brown's game check for $500K, brother, that's guaranteed 82 times. There's a difference. Both Max and Jaylen train, but it's obviously auxiliary to their sport-specific training. Jaylen was literally just at the PI doing Muay Thai sessions. If they did choose to fight, it would be something that at that stage of their career, given what they had already earned and what their status of their other sport, I mean, it'd be something that they're doing absolutely for the love of the game. And let's just take a look from a financial side of things at some minimums here. The NBA rookie minimum is $1.1 million. Now, there's a few exemptions with like the 10-day and the 2-way contracts and a couple of things. But on average, if we're just talking, what is the general rookie contract? You're looking at $1.1 million is the minimum in the NBA. You have the NFL rookie minimum salary right now sitting north of $800K. Hell, practice squad guys, P squad, you're looking on average between 13 to 22,000 weekly, depending on what your tenure of service is. If you're there through the full season, that's still $250,000, which is a lot more than what most any fighter is ever going to make in their career. UFC rookie contracts are 10 and 10, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000 to show up, 10,000 to win. You're not even guaranteed your full 20,000 just by showing up to fight night. At least in football, basketball, baseball, whatever, you're going to get your full game check. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. So when you ask what would fix the heavyweight division, again, one of the prevailing topics that circles back in the crosshairs is fighter pay. Why go fight when you can make a practice squad for one season and make more money in that 1 year than most guys will ever make fighting? Then now you want to add to it that there's NIL money into the equation for some of these guys coming out of college. If you've already racked in a few $100,000 or in some cases a couple $1 million, especially if now that some of these guys are having NIL money from their freshman year all the way through, some of them have a pretty nice little nut built up already by the time that they're done with collegiate competition. Unless you had this insatiable urge for the violence, for the competition, for all of that, why? Why would you go fight? When you could just parlay that money into other things that makes money while you sleep, and you basically have an easy life after college because of that NIL money. Why? Why would you go fight? I'll be blunt. If the heavyweight division offered any sort of competitive compensation in relation to the other professional sports, it would be a wrap for 99% of all heavyweights today. Hell, especially if you add in back to some of the old pride days of a super heavyweight division of 265 plus, you'd have some Goliath battles of guys that you typically would see in your NFL trenches, or maybe some of the bigs that you see in the paint from the NBA world. I think a lot less from the NBA versus what you would see in the NFL, but there are some of those guys who are cut from that cloth. I've been in the gym with NFL guys training. I've been in the gym with them. The raw, explosive power, not the most technical because it's not what they're doing every single day, but if they applied the time and the work that they put into their football craft into fighting, can you imagine what those elite level athletes would be? It would be a completely different landscape for the heavyweight division. You have to keep in mind too that there's a lot of these dudes who they were successful wrestlers in the prep level, or some of them even wrestled in college, or in the off season were doing some time with, say, like your Team USA runs, or going and doing some national tournaments. You see Josh Hokett and what he's doing right now in the UFC, rising the ranks, and he was a Pac-10 wrestler. He's not even a top elite NCAA one guy or a world team or anything of that sort, and he had a brief little stint in the NFL. He's on the lower end, respectively speaking, of the athletic spectrum of guys coming from the NFL, and he's already making waves in the heavyweight division. Let's take a look on the flip side of things of a guy like Harrison Phillips, for example. Stud, longtime NFL standout. He would dog walk guys. You're talking about a dude who in high school went 130-0 while never once giving up a single takedown throughout his entire career. He won 3 state championships and 4 national championships. Guys like Ray Lewis were state champion wrestlers in high school. And we allegedly know what his hand-to-hand skill set is otherwise, allegedly. You have guys like Riley Reef. He went 121-1 in high school with multiple state championships. Aaron Donald was a Pennsylvania state level wrestler. You think that those guys wouldn't come in and be able to win fights? And yeah, you could say the ability to take a punch is different and this and that. Well, a lot of those guys in the trenches, man, they're banging it out regularly anyway. I can tell you 100% that if Derek Wolf would have had the opportunity to fight, Derek Wolf would have shred a lot of people out there in the boxing ring or in an MMA cage. I can say that from what I've seen with my own 2 eyes. But that's not all ipso facto, right? It's not to say that just because they were a good athlete in the NFL or the NBA, it doesn't mean that they're going to be good fighters. But in all of that sample of the fighters across those couple of leagues, there are absolutely guys who would be able to weather the storm, both mentally and physically. And they are starting off with a vastly superior skill set and just a base, an athletic base and genetic advantage in terms of their musculature, their athleticism, their ability to recover, their ability to process information fast. All of those things would translate into fighting if they made fighting a full-time thing. Guys coming from the NBA, you're meaning to tell me that a Kenyon Martin, who grew up fighting grown men from the time when he was a young teenager across gyms all over Texas and then building up and being the goon in the NBA that he was for years. You're meaning to tell me that at 6'5", 230, or excuse me, 6'9", 230, that's not someone who brings some interesting matchup options? Somebody who's athletic at 6'9", 230 pounds, has hands, has a mean streak in him. You're basically looking at an athletic Gan McGee. If any of you out there, that's pulling one from the annals, if any of you out there can write in and say who Gan McGee is, I will hook you up with 2 tickets to the next Combat Club or 5280 show of your choice, if you can write that in there. This would never be signed off on, but when you look at how the NFL collective bargaining agreement is structured, well, quarterbacks have the opportunity for a max salary that's a little bit different than everybody else, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm right with that, Danny, right?
Correct.
Yes, just want to make sure I didn't have that off when I was putting my thoughts together here. But in relation to the rest of the roster, quarterbacks can get paid a little bit more. Well, what if the UFC were to pilot a program and you would have to put the trust in for, say, 2-3 years for any sort of actual results to materialize from it? But what if you were to pilot a program where you offered a higher base salary or an entrance for guys who had those NBA or NFL credentials behind their name? What if you had an opportunity for some to potentially net some of those guys to come over and build a pipeline? It's never going to happen. It's not practical. And you're going to have a big uproar from the rest of your roster who says, hey, I'm making 10 and 10. And you're going to go give this guy who's never fought, never had MMA training or very minimal MMA training. You're going to go give him, say 100 per fight. Get out of here. That would have complete uproar, but just throwing out something that could entice those top tier big guys. Because that's the big deal is big guys can go get paid to do more elsewhere. That's what it all keeps on circling back to. All in all, if heavyweights had anywhere near a remote level of compensation that was somewhat around what the other sports are, the division would be night and day. Guys like Jaylen Brown or Max Crosby might not be UFC champions, but they would certainly be competitive with a lot of guys out there in the mix today. Going to move through some things here quick, running a little long here. We have Kurtz's Corner and the message of the week. Guys, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes it rains. If you can give me where that quote comes from, guys, I'll also find a way to get you some prizes there. Might be some tickets to Combat Club or 5280, maybe throw in some CJJC, but need your responses here. Hit that comment section and let me know. Going to move along to our final segment of the hour. We got my man Danny Bailey behind the boards for me. 3 rounds. First one, what do we have?
Gamebred FC is back this spring with a 16-man heavyweight bare-knuckle MMA tournament. What are your thoughts?
First and foremost, for all of the fighters' sake, I hope that all of the funding that they're discussing is guaranteed. I hope that that's something that's locked, that's in an escrow account, that's in something that is guaranteed, that's not going to be touched, that's not going to be bled out by potential janky people involved, as we've seen with some other shows out there. If I'm fighting on the card, I'm pressing for my people to get me a Chris Lieben type of deal. What do I mean by a Chris Lieben deal? Well, Chris Lieben was a part of the infamous bare knuckle show that happened in Wyoming a couple of years ago that stiffed everybody on the card. But Chris Lieben negotiated, I believe it was either 10 or 15% up front. So at least he was walking away with something. Because he said, like, you know what? Some of the spidey senses, he wanted to go through with it. But there was also the thought that, I don't know, these guys might be a little bit dodgy. Well, at least he was correct in getting some money up front. I would be potentially doing the same if I'm these guys, because Jorge's already had an issue with a fight where the boxing match with Nate Diaz has had financial discrepancies. Well, if I'm all of these guys, I'm making sure that guarantee, I believe that the grand prize of the tournament is $500K. Well, I'm making sure that all of this has some sort of guarantee. My lawyers are looking through all of this. They're combing through it with a fine tooth comb. Anthony Smith and Chase Sherman is the first big matchup that they've announced. Anthony Smith, Lionheart, he's been a longtime supporter of the bare knuckle scene for as long as I've known him. Since basically, 2018, whatever, when bare knuckle was really starting to pop off into bubble. I've known Anthony to be a supporter of it from the very beginning. I'm not surprised that it's something that he's kicking the tire on. I just hope that he's doing it with intention. Skill for skill, there should never be a day on God's green earth that Chase Sherman can compete with Anthony Lionheart Smith at any form of martial arts. Any. But what's Anthony's motivation? What's his is he inspired? Is he doing all of the work leading into the fight? Because that's what a lot of the questions were into the final couple of fights of his UFC run. And I say that with all due love and respect. Anthony's a friend of the program. He's been a friend of mine for years and years now. But that's one thing that I question. What is the motivation at this point? If it's to go out there and to just kind of feel the rush again, well, then I like that. But if it's for, just chasing another pay, I don't know.
Nate Diaz teased a potential comeback and listed 3 opponents he would be in to face. What are your thoughts on the list he made and his potential comeback?
Obviously, the top one on the list is the Conor trilogy. That's obvious. Honestly, that's potentially more realistic than it's been in the last few years. That's a fight that can be made at any point in time, and it will get made at some stage. I would just imagine that if I'm the UFC, I'm trying to make sure that that happens on my show. I'm not trying to allow that to happen on either one of their independent promotions or underneath any other banner. I'd be trying to make that fight happen if I'm the UFC. I don't know if that's a fight that I'm stacking. I mean, I probably, if in my dream world of booking, that's not a White House card fight. That's a fight that you're putting at T-Mobile, that you're putting at one of these arena-based events where you have fans, where you are going to draw a massive crowd, and you have just exuberant revenue options from the respective cult-like followings that both of those two guys have. They're arguably across the world. Conor, there's no debate on him being the most profitable, but still at this stage of the game, not anywhere near their primes of what they were, say 10 years ago in terms of draw, traction, whatever. Still, even at this stage of the game, at damn near 40 years old apiece, those are two of the biggest global MMA superstars. Why would you not want to put that together? He also mentioned Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier was a fight that was supposed to happen at one point in time. That matchup fizzled. Probably wouldn't be the best fight for Nate, but Dustin is definitely training for something. What? Don't know. Couldn't tell you yet, but Dustin is back down in South Florida. He's putting in hard rounds. He's shown some of the training that he's been doing. He's in there with the mix of Gamrot and some of those dudes. Dustin is training for something. What? We don't know yet. Last round. Oh, Mike Perry would be the other one, but, I don't know if that's a realistic fight.
Gordon Ryan made what appears to be a retirement post at just 30 years old. Is he done for good?
Well, in the last, near decade, there really hasn't been a man that's been able to beat Gordon Ryan, but the gut issues are seemingly unbeatable. Here's a statement that Gordon made that he put out announcing what seems to be his retirement, or at least retirement for the time being. He says, "Today marks 10 years at black belt, 10 years on top of the sport, and the probable end of my competitive career. As many of you know, I've had this debilitating and seemingly unfixable stomach issue since recurring staph infections and antibiotics wiped out my good gut biome. Without going too much into boring detail, the problem has gone through phases of better and worse over the years and has now morphed into a multitude of new problems, including me just getting sick or staph whenever I train hard and compromise my immune system in any way. Because of these issues, I have not been able to train or lift hard since January of 2024, as I just begin dry heaving immediately when I do. I competed in ADCC with no camp at 10% of how I should have been operating, and I have seen no improvement in my condition since. This, of course, has been immensely frustrating as my technical skills are far better than ever. My body is otherwise very healthy, and I'm only 30 years old, 10 years from my prime. I have so much more left to give if I could just fix this one issue. I'm still on the mats almost every day, but not able to do what my mind tells my body. Because of this, I believe that it is best that I put my focuses elsewhere for now as I try to remedy my stomach and possibly return one day pending my health and assessment of relative physical skills at the time. As my knowledge is unmatched, but for now, I can confidently say I am done. I will spend the next few years building Kingsway headquarters to its student capacity, opening global affiliations program, and helping athletes achieve all of their goals and dreams. Sharing all the knowledge with athletes all over the world. After that, who knows? There are far too many people involved to thank, but you know who you are. To the fans, thank you. The thought of selling out T-Mobile Arena for a jiu-jitsu event was unheard of when I started training. We truly made this sport something great, and you all have made me genuinely wealthy along the way. This wouldn't have been possible without you all and your constant support. Thank you to everyone involved. I hope to be back, especially for the 2 matches with Vinny and a last dance with Felipe until the time comes. I think that, yeah, that's the send-off. Gordon has had a ton of health issues, and if he can't be healthy enough to compete at the highest of level, if he can't have his system be able to respond, well, yeah, that's kind of a wrap. That's it. Hopefully there's something that is able to be done for him to get his body right, because losing somebody who is, call it for what it is, who was that damn good, like, love him or hate him, you can't say that Gordon Ryan was not good at jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of reasons why you could hate Gordon. I'm not going to doubt that. But there's really not a lot that you can say in criticism of his actual practice of the sport itself. But just like that, though, folks, we are all out of time. We're wrapping it up right now. I want to give a big thank you to the Mile High Sports crew. Thank you to my man, Danny Bailey, behind the boards. Coming to you from the Mile High Sports Studio at number 38, presented by Volo and the Vimos app. I'm Jordan Kurtz. Give me a follow along online on Instagram and Threads at Comments from the Peanut Gallery, the Peanut Gallery MMA on TikTok. We'll see you back next week, same time, same place. This is the MMA Plug presented to you by Mile High Sports.